Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be taking a look at action visibility rules in decisions. Action visibility rules are going to allow users to selectively filter and hide custom or default actions associated with specific data types. These rules influence what is visible in the action menu when selecting a specific entity, ensuring that users only see relevant and permitted actions. So we're going to be focusing on these visibility rules in three sections here in decisions. We're going to be talking about them in data structures, in the configuration folder, and on reports and pages. So when thinking about action visibility rules, you want to contemplate who do you want interacting with the data and how do you want them interacting with it. You'll have use cases where you can have no actions available, and you'll have other use cases where you have a ton of actions available. Let's take a look at some of these different use cases in decisions, starting at the data structure level. All right, so I've hopped on over to decisions. So we're going to start with the data structure level. I have a case entity on here. Why? Because I love case entities, but also because they have a configuration folder. And in that configuration folder, you are going to be able to add action visibility rules. So on the screen right now, I'm going to kind of have a pop-up. You can see on this little chart, certain data structures allow configuration folders by default, and some of them you have to go in and enable them. So for a lot of these action visibility rules, you're going to want them to have a configuration folder. But let's talk about some default actions that come with these structures. So if I open up this case entity, if I open up this case entity and edit the structure, you'll see at the bottom here we have these default actions which you can enable or disable through this kind of menu. So if I want the option to delete or edit or manage permissions, all of those can show up as an actual user action. You can turn them on or you can turn them off right here from the data structure in decisions. But again, for simplicity, I kind of just left it as its default. I didn't want to give you kind of too many options when I right click on one of these records here in a few moments. So let's start taking a look at some of these actions. So I have a purchase request data folder here in my public folder, and it is full of data that I have pre-populated. You'll notice that as I right click on these records, I'm given these options for actions. If I right click a different record, I'm getting different actions. And as I go through, I'm going to have more or less actions depending on the data that is in that record. I did that with action visibility rules. A lot of that is going to come from this configuration folder. So when you make a data structure, a case entity in decisions, it will by default make one of these configuration folders for you. It'll just have two states, started and completed, and you can add states as you go. You'll notice that I have certain user actions under certain states. So if the record is in the state manager review, they'll be given the option to show a pop-up. If the record is in the action for canceled, you'll be given the action to send request back to originator. So you can apply individual user actions, which is kind of a type of action visibility rules, to each individual state in this case entity. Or if you want to apply it to all of them, like I did with this show pop-up, if you click user actions in the top, it'll allow you to apply a user action to all of those. And when you create a user action, it's just going to allow you to create a flow. So we'll just say, show me the flow. And I can pick a flow that does exist, which I don't have any right now, but it will allow you to, or you can create a new one down here. I can just create a new one, and look, I have this flow. I'll just connect it for now. So what ends up happening is, in a different flow somewhere, you can use a set entity state and set the entity state to one of these records, and you'll notice that now we have show me the flow. So if I set the entity state to started, and it lives in that state, I will have the user action to show me the flow, which currently does nothing. But I can go ahead and delete some of these. Right? If I want to add a user action to just a singular flow here, I don't want to add it, or a state, I don't want to add to all my states. You can do that with just this activity right here. So the same kind of concept. I can add a user action. I'm going to call this show me the flow part 2. And you'll notice that when I go through here, it gives me a flow. This is what will run when you use that user action. But show me the flow part 2 only showed up under order completed. So again, kind of part of visibility, you can add it into certain states. So when a record goes into that state, you'll only have those actions. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one as well. I do have one built out called show pop-up. So whenever a record goes through, it will show a pop-up with some information, and we can kind of show that here in a moment. Anytime it changes its state, it'll go through and have that option to show a pop-up as an action. So any record that I have in any state, I'll have the option to show a pop-up. However, I might want to parse that down a little bit more. So if I don't want the option to show a pop-up at all times, you can add an action visibility rule, which is kind of why we're here today. So these action visibility rules are going to allow you to create a rule to filter out what can not be seen. So for this particular action, we're saying the action name equals show pop-up and the entity extension total cost is less than $200. So let's see what that looks like in application. And then we'll come back and review the rule here. So I've got some records. We'll go to this report because I can view it a little better. Notice that when I click a record that is less than $200, I'm not given the option to show a pop-up. But if I right-click a record that is more than $200, now I have show pop-up. So that's what it's going to look like in its use. Let's talk about designing that rule again here a little bit. So again, this is going to filter out. We're going to filter out. So anything less than $200 will be filtered out. And what will be filtered out? The action name called show pop-up. This is just a constant. Action.name are dropdowns. So action name equals show pop-up. You can have lists, you can make rules. If the entity user is an initiating user, or if they're in a certain group, you can make those rules as well. So we can make one really, really quick here. So to make an action visibility rule, you can start by doing an action visibility rule up here in the top toolbar. What this is going to allow you to do is name that rule. So we're going to say this: fun with action visibility rules. So in this space, you can start with the action name, because this is what we're going to be filtering out here. So we're going to say the action name equals, and we'll make it a constant of show pop up to kind of bounce through this. So we're going to basically be filtering this with a couple different rules here. Now we got to figure out what are we assessing in order to be able to filter it out. So when I add the condition here, you'll notice that I'm given a lot of options. I'm given the option for entity extension, which is going to have the information from the actual record itself. I'm given the option for entity, and this is going to be a lot of that folder information, just information that lives as kind of an extension of the case entity. I'm going to be given the action information. I'm also going to be given flow data. How does flow data work in this use case? Flow data is going to work by whoever is performing this action, it will populate that data then, or whoever is looking at the report. So we can say that we want the initiating user groups, and we'll say contains, and you'll notice on here I have a lot of these groups. So if I put something like HR in here, because I'm a member of the HR group, it will filter that out for me. So now as I go back and take a look, I can't show a pop-up on anything anymore because I am a member of that HR group. So let's go back and remove that. If you get yourself into an action visibility rule and you're trying to figure out, hey, I had this thing halfway built out, but I don't know exactly what it's doing, or I just want to turn it on and off, a useful tool here is to be able to go to settings and just turn it off and say, hey, I want to test something for a moment. And you can disenable it, or you can have start dates and end times in which rules occur. So because I have this, we have flow data, initiating user groups, list contains HR. Let's say I had a group called sales and I don't want them to be able to show a pop-up. I am not a member of the sales group. IT, HR, designers, administrators, and all users. Now that I've done that and changed it back, if I go look at that data again, I'll be given the option to show a pop-up. It has the current date and my email. I got those dynamically from that flow in here. current email with my email because I'm the one who happens to run this flow when I right click it. And the subject is the time, formatted in short time. So again, as we kind of go through, you can build out some pretty complex rules about visibility of particular actions here in decisions. You can continue to add. You can add either or. So we're filtering out sales members. We can also filter out a number of different options. You saw the one for $200 earlier, but we can just say, hey, we don't want to be able to show the pop-up on anything done by a certain department, or after a certain date, before a certain date, someone with a particular name. If you've got a coworker and you don't want them particularly doing something, filter them out. But those are all options for you with these action visibility rules. In order to keep this kind of concise, we're going to kind of keep moving into more ways to filter out actions and decisions, because you might not want to build it out this way. It depends on what your story for your business is. You might want to be able to have multiple reports and not apply the same action visibility rules to everything within the structure. You might want to be able to give a certain report to a certain user or a certain page to a certain user, and they have or do not have actions. So let's move over to the pages and dashboards kind of section of these action visibility rules. All right, so in a dashboard, I've got two reports here. You may have a use case where you have a report or a dashboard where you want no user actions enabled, and you do not want to run through a ton of action visibility rules because the only people looking at this dashboard or page, that's all they're going to be doing. And you don't want to have to filter it out in a million different ways and cause some unforeseen issues. You can turn off actions on the report level. You'll notice as I right click through here, you can't tell, but I am right clicking as I go through. And even if I left click, there are no actions for that either. There's just nothing. But as I go on this left side, the exact same report, depending on the state, depending on the rule, we will have different actions to do different things, depending on the state it's in, right? Like this one down here for canceled. I have send request back to originator. Why do I have that? Because in the canceled state, that's a user action I have. It's only available there. So, but as I go through here, it's not going to let me do any of that. So I did that in the report, as you can see over here on the right side. So if I go to the report with no user actions, this report under actions, I've just turned them off. No actions are enabled at all, right? You can also on the page make some changes in this world as well. You actually have a little more options on the page. So on the page level, if I go to that page and click on this report, I'm given more options here under behavior, and you can, under actions, you can filter by category. So action categories, which you can adjust by right clicking them in the list view of the configuration folder, or just by the name, like names to show. You can just say, hey, I want to filter and only these actions are available on this particular report. But because in my actual report itself, I've turned off the actions, I'm only going to be given no action. So if I turn on show actions on right click, and then I go back to that same old behavior, actions, filter actions by name, and the names to show is show pop-up. Now that's the only action that will be available on this report. So you'll notice that when I click on this canceled request, I'm given all of these actions. When I click on this side, I'm only given show pop-up. Notice the difference, right? And that's all done on the page level there. So again, let's kind of undo that just for some continuity here. Under behavior, we're going to turn off the filter, and we're going to say, again, back to no actions here. So hopefully you can see how we can filter actions on the page level, on the report level, in the structure level, as well as in the configuration folder. You are given many, many options, and really it's all just going to fit the story that you need for your business. So it depends on who needs to do what and how they need to do it. We do have best practices and troubleshooting step for visibility rules on our documentation site. So if you go to documentation.decisions.com and search for action visibility rules, we do have quite a bit of information for you. But that is what I have for you today. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to training@decisions.com or support@decisions.com, and we can get you the help you need. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.